Sheridan Gates, a friend and a colleague of mine, wrote a book a few years ago called Losing Sight, Finding Vision. She tells us of how in very early adulthood she developed macular degeneration, which over time left her functionally blind. She can read a computer screen with great magnification, as well as carry on a very successful consulting and coaching practice. What grabbed my attention the most in Sheridan's book was her relating how she had to learn to listen to her body. Crossing Connecticut Avenue in Washington, D.C., not far from her apartment, was a dicey, dangerous proposition for somebody with limited eyesight. In such situations, she had to learn to listen to her body. And when I read that, I contacted her and asked her if she would be my coach and spiritual guide because she had learned something that I needed to learn. So we met frequently for a year or so until she moved. And during that time, Sheridan taught me some skills that she had learned: centering, balancing, movement, all ways of listening to her body. I found it almost impossible to catch on to the idea of listening to my body. It took me months to realize that listening to my body was not the same as imagining or thinking about what my legs or some other body part might be saying, but rather paying attention to what those different parts of my body were sensing, feeling, registering. I became fascinated. Well, suddenly I realized how little I had been listening to my body. And even now, as I speak, I'm aware of how easy it has been to fall back into an overlived intellect in which cognition supplants sensation. The mind is wonderful, and I surely don't want to lose mine. But the mind doesn't need to be prized at the expense of other parts of us that communicate too. Trauma research documents that our bodies store memories. Tuning into what our bodies say, especially as they process what we see and smell, hear, taste, touch, can not only be revealing, but liberating. When we come to our senses, we begin to experience more deeply and immediately the world around us and the world within us. Some of us are much more adept than others at paying attention to what we take in through our senses. Many of us as children learn to distrust not only our senses, but our entire bodies. Were you taught that a spiritual life was antithetical to your body, especially your sexuality? How about the notion that the body is the prison of the immortal soul, and that its sensate life is warring against the incorporeal divine soul? From Plato, pretty much. Was your soul identified with life beyond death and thus might be in danger of missing out on eternity because your body would sabotage it? Just as a side note, it's interesting that many folk who carry such ideas with them are indeed wed to crass materialism, prizing money and possessions over love itself, and justice, which is love's expression in society. So, how do we rescue the life of the senses from the notion that they are the enemy of morality, dangerously feeding the body's desires and fueling its appetites? We might start by revisiting the fact that we are animals. We're a species of primates with a peculiar kind of consciousness. We're not the only conscious species by far, but we are the only species on Earth with highly developed abilities reflected in language and fine motor skills. Still, we can learn much from some of our animal cousins. You know, it's extremely rare for human beings to have as keen a sense of smell as the average dog. There are frequencies that human ears don't pick up, with only the rarest of exceptions. There's a reason that dogs are trained to sniff out drugs and track felons, because human beings can't do what dogs can do. And don't forget the humans are the ones training and managing the dogs and other animals, jobs that our species can do quite well. So the point is not to become like other species, but to recover what we have lost or nurture capacities that we have never fully developed. It isn't that we are unfinished, but that we are unstarted. Moreover, we've lost a good deal of sensate sharpness, not only through suppressing our senses, but also by overindulging them. It's possible to take in so much sensory information that we're on overload and thus don't really pay attention to what's in front of us. Look, for example, at how the world of mass advertising plasters visual images of the human body everywhere. Do we even look, much less see? And it isn't just images. Some days I walk along a well-worn path in sight of spectacular mountains through the territories of roadrunners, hawks, eagles, ground squirrels, flowering desert shrubs, and fragrant acacia trees. You know what I see all along the way? People texting, filling their heads with whatever is playing through their AirPods. It's not my business to run down what others do, but I wonder why we'd prefer anything to the sounds, smells, sights that swell around us in a virtual symphony of beauty. And then when I look deeply into myself, I'm aware that though I might not be texting or listening to sound files, I'm frequently lost in the musings of my mind. I can't be fully present if I'm distracting myself from the moment at hand to go somewhere else in my mind. What are we thinking when we do that? Usually it's either something in the past that we're fixated upon, an old grudge, a recent conversation, a political irritation, memories, regrets, unmet expectations, or something in the future, errands to run, plans, what might happen in some part of our world. Memory is a blessing, and being able to plan for the future is a survival skill. Yet being open to the present moment's sights, sounds, tastes, touches, odors can easily get crowded out. And we are the poorer when that happens. In remembrance of things past, Marcel Proust describes his mother's offering him a cup of lime blossom tea on a cold winter's day with some little cakes called madeleines. First he declined, but then dipped a madeleine into the tea and tasted it. And immediately, he says, a surpassing delight filled him with joy, and a feeling not unlike love saturated his senses. After sticking with the sensation for a time, a memory from childhood sprang into his consciousness. Taste of the tea-soaked madeleine recalled, indeed recreated, the experience long past of his aunts giving him a piece of cake dipped in tea. Such is the power of the sense of smell, able to catapult us back into a scene vividly real. Melodies can take us back into the scenes long past. Tastes can renew the experience of occasions long forgotten. Coming to our senses is not a matter of believing a proposition. It's a matter of living more fully. And living more fully in turn means celebrating and using our erotic energy, the great awakener of the whole body, if only we'll let it. St. Irenaeus said centuries ago, the glory of God is the human being fully alive. To be fully alive is to claim every part of ourselves, perhaps beginning with the most accessible and sometimes the most neglected of all parts, our senses.